So if you give somebody growth hormone and they feel really good and they're aging less and their skin feels good and their muscles look good, and then you remove that, you crash from it severely. Whereas if you give a peptide that promotes the growth hormone extraction from the anterior pituitary in a natural way, and then you remove that, you do better. You function better for a longer period of time. You don't have any crash. That's one of the things that tells you that peptides are the way that your body normally functions, and adding them into your body is in general a good thing. Hello everyone, welcome back to Vital Discourse with Dr. Ben and Dr. Lee. Today we're continuing our conversation about facelifts and facial rejuvenation. When we last met, we talked about celebrity before and afters and had some fun speculating on what may or may not have been done. Today we're going a layer deeper and talk about what celebrity rejuvenation culture does to normal people's expectations of aging, what causes aging, and some promising aging research that may cause a massive shift in the way we age over the coming years. Stay tuned to learn about aging prevention with our introduction to what you can do to look and stay younger.
Okay, Ben, so if you remember when we were talking about, I believe it was when we were talking about rhinoplasty, we were talking about body dysmorphia or body dysmorphic syndrome. If you look at the studies, roughly 13% of facial cosmetic surgery patients screen positive for body dysmorphic disorder versus 1.8% of reconstructive patients. And that was a JAMA Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery article from 2017. Newer screening in aging face and injectable populations found rates as high as 41%, and that's out of Stanford in 2023. And generally speaking, surgeons only identify a real small minority of these patients in clinical settings. The American Academy of Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, which both you and I are members of and we're board certified, also show that 75% of facial plastic surgeons see patients seeking procedures to look better in selfies. Okay, just in selfies. Okay, that's a little crazy. So certainly, what's our ethical responsibility as surgeons, right? In terms of these people coming in and how do we counsel them?
That's an ongoing problem. I mean, I think that every doc in our position has had that patient that you are alarmed at the moment they come in just from disposition, how aggressive they are, how realistic they are in assessing where they're at and where they want to go, what types of things that they bring in for you to look at. This is what I want to look like. I mean, you to a certain extent, you're thin slicing, right? We've been doing this so long. My medical career spans 33 years, and yours is similar. And after a while, you develop a really good intuition based on an enormous exposure to many people coming in asking things. So if I get a feeling from somebody that they have unrealistic expectations or unrealistic views of themselves, I tend to sort of push for non-invasive things and or doing nothing. If they really want something done, I have a team of psychiatrists that work near me who are more than happy to evaluate that patient just to make sure that what I'm suspecting is not right. So far, I have almost 100% hit rate when somebody insists that they want something done, and I send them over there. Every time that I've sent them over there, it's come back that, in general, that person has some type of body dysmorphic syndrome and would not benefit from a procedure. So, I mean, I don't have a formal way of going about it. At this point in my life, it's more informal. There are questionnaires and whatnot, but again, I go off intuition. Do you?
I do, but I think there's been a change over time in terms of what's considered an unrealistic aging standard, right? So,
sure.
Our society as a whole expects us to not age or to age slower than what our bodies would tell us to, or are programmed to. And so you mentioned non-invasive or minimally invasive things that can be done. So what are some of those things that can be done, and can they be started early to maybe make it so that we don't have to end up where we're doing things more drastic like surgeries and whatnot to change the way we look?
Yeah, I think that people looking young is a commodity, right? It's a currency that we all exchange with each other. Looking more vital, having a good routine. I think we use that to get ahead in your relationships and in business. So the things that I recommend are your routine. What's going to refine your routine? I have a routine. I think life comes down to a routine. You are a product of what you do every day, right? So things that can help. When I say minimally invasive, things that can help. Whether it means calming down some of the wrinkles or the texture of the skin, what products you put on your skin, right? The new thing is the peptides. So GHKCU is in a lot of topical treatments for the skin and really helps to rejuvenate and keep the skin healthy looking with a good appearance. What kind of skincare regimen you use? What do you wash your face with? If you have static wrinkles, we talked about this before, using some Botox to calm down muscle action so that you don't beat up those elastin fibers and create more wrinkles or more pronounced wrinkles. Fillers, we're losing volume to our face, and so adding a little bit of volume to take some of those shadows away that let people know your age can also help. And those. I use hyaluronic acid-based ones because it's a natural ground substance between cells, and it's reversible. So those things matter to me. These are the things that I kind of recommend on a regular basis. Also, what you put in your body, the food that you eat, right? We've talked a lot on this show about toxic food supply and chemicals that we have in our food that can cause problems inside our body, chronic disease, and that has manifestations in the appearance. So I talk in my wellness center, Butterfly Med Spa and Wellness, I talk to them a lot about what they eat and the Mediterranean diet, going away from foods that contain a lot of preservatives. I talk about whole foods, not the company, but things that are not packaged, things that are not processed. So the things that what they usually call on the perimeter of the grocery store, right? So the vegetables and meats, instead of things that come in a box with a really long list of ingredients, I tend to shy away from. Are these things that you are thinking about? I have a wellness center where I do this. Are you incorporating this into your general practice?
So from the perspective of things like laser, certainly, there are
Yeah, we do lasers also. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously there are multiple different types of lasers that can be used. Anything from something that just looks like a little bit of a sandblast, to just kind of plump things up for a weekend, to really more ablative lasers like erbium or CO2 lasers that can really make a difference in terms of increasing collagen deposition. I guess the question becomes, if you start that at an early enough age, do you potentially prevent the necessity for something like facelifting? And I think from the perspective of skin alone, maybe, but obviously skin treatments can't change your underlying fat positioning or SMAS positioning, or fat, the layers underneath the skin.
Or volume loss. You're losing so much volume.
Exactly. And so I still think that ultimately you end up needing things like fat transfer and those types of things, but perhaps preventing cutting in the future. I think starting early enough, even with the right kind of general skincare, Not to not to endorse anything, but I use a daily peel from Dennis Gross. I've used it for years, and I think it helps. I don't know what I would look like
What's
if
it
I
based
didn't
on?
use
Is it
it.
an alpha lipoic acid?
Yes,
What is
exactly.
it?
That's exactly what it is.
It is. Okay. So yeah, and you recommend that to folks quite often in your practice?
I don't go as far as recommending that per se in my practice because, again, I hate to, at that point, specifically endorse something. But I have a lot of dermatology colleagues that are, really are very, very good at skincare, and I'd rather, allow them to opine on that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that that I think is helpful, that I've seen is helpful, and again, it's not going to keep you from getting a facelift. It's not going to keep you from needing a fat transfer, but certainly it could
But
potentially
certainly it's
delay
part
it.
of it. I mean,
And your skin itself, that just the texture of your skin, it improves
yeah.
because it doesn't matter how many facelifts you get, it's not going to change the texture of your skin.
Yeah, and if actually it's the marriage of both that really gives you a young, healthy appearance. You can reposition skin, and you can drape it nicely over the bones. But if you've been smoking heavily with a lot of sun exposure and you look like old leather, that's not going to change that, and you're still going to look like old leather. You're just going to look like redraped old leather. So you really have to hit both, and I think you can really tell when somebody doesn't eat healthily, and their organs inside are not doing very well. It comes out in the skin. There's a lot of dermatologic manifestations of poor eating habits, and I think that's well documented. So the danger isn't just unrealistic beauty standards; it's unrealistic aging standards, and so we want to really. The thing that's going to stop you from getting a facelift at an early age is not aging. And so we're back to the idea, to understand this, you have to understand the changes that are taking place on the skin itself, on the skin surface, and below, that's causing you to lose cells, lose volume.
So to that end, I know you're a huge proponent of peptides in your own personal use. We do know that from the perspective of the FDA doesn't approve or per se of peptides, and there is a quote unquote ban on the ability for compounding pharmacies to produce these peptides for use. Some of that might change. I know that RFK Jr. is looking to at least have a vote on certain peptides coming up soon that would allow compounding pharmacies to create them for patients. BPC 157, TB 500, KPV, MOT SC, amideltide, Epitalon, and Semax are some of them. And again, not necessarily being a proponent of these from the perspective of telling people to use them, but what are your feelings on peptides, and what are your feelings on the individual peptides and what they quote unquote possibly could or couldn't do?
I think it's really important to understand peptides. One of the best books in order to do that comes from William Seeds. It's called Peptide Protocols, and it's a great introduction. It's a little heavy on the biochemistry, but it's only 130, 140 pages, and you can kind of grind through it and read it a couple of times if necessary. Just to give you an understanding, peptides are little tiny small chains of amino acids of varying length, and they basically are cellular messengers inside the body. They're natural body products. There's about 5,000 of them that have been characterized since we've done the Human Genome Project. And there's about 120 to 150 that are sort of been researched and are in a common use worldwide. In the U.S., we're a little bit more reserved about it. The FDA is taking its time. They put some of the most commonly used ones, actually, so in a surprise move in November of 2023. They moved them onto a Schedule II, which made them inaccessible and uncompoundable at a 503A pharmacy. And so we haven't been prescribing those to patients in our wellness center since then. But we use them all the time. I mean, there are many. Peptides have been around forever. Insulin was the first peptide to be used. It's a natural body peptide, and we were able to isolate it and use it, obviously, to cure diabetes. And you can speak to that more than anybody else, Lee. But I can tell you that sermorelin and other peptides that allow your body to produce growth hormone naturally have changed the game for people looking to enhance muscle, decrease the effects of aging, and produce more growth hormone in their body naturally. You know, our body works on negative feedback inhibition, and what that means is that you don't want to just give it a product. If you give it a natural body product like testosterone or growth hormone, the cells in our body that produce it tend to shut down. So when you remove that product, you have a crash. So if you give somebody growth hormone and they feel really good and they're aging less and their skin feels good and their muscles look good, and then you remove that, you crash from it severely. Whereas if you give a peptide that promotes the growth hormone extraction from the anterior pituitary in a natural way, and then you remove that. Matter of fact, they recommend removing it, doing it in cycles. You do better. You function better for a longer period of time. You don't have any crash. So that's one of the things that tells you that peptides are the way that your body normally functions, and adding them into your body is in general a good thing. So hopefully the FDA will work this out, and we'll have more peptides available and more studies, more importantly, studies that define what they do in humans a little bit better when you add them exogenously. That's my feeling on it.
I think you bring up fantastic points, and the point that you made kind of in the intro, how with AI and whatnot, who knows how long we're going to be living, right? We're going to be living a lot longer, presumably, and if we're living longer, we're going to continue aging. So we're going to have to come up with new ways of doing this, because you can only operate on the face so many times. Right. So
well, the thing is that if you understand aging, and I think it's important to talk about it, so we'll do it now. If you understand aging, and then you're able to reverse it, then that's a natural way to extend the number of times that we can zip around the sun, extend our age, right? And so you will have less appearance of aging because you are reversing the thing that ages you. So I've said it before, we're all turning from grapes into raisins. We're losing volume instruction. 37 trillion cells that we have as a male human, I think 32 to 35 as a female. And we're losing those cells in a pre-programmed process. And so let's just really quickly, aging is governed by the number of times that our cells can reproduce, right? And it's different by cell type and by cell type and by genetics for each individual person. So neurons stop, they differentiate and then don't reproduce at all until told to do so. Gut continually rejuvenates, and then kidney and liver and those things, about 40 to 60 or 60 to 80 divisions, and then they stop dividing. They become senescent cells, and senescent cells are kind of the bane of our existence. They're the ones that cause aging. They're the ones that cause all the problems inside our body. Damage to the DNA. They give off chemicals that cause the cells around them to worsen their function. And then, or apoptosis, where they actually die off. And so it's kind of a process that you can recognize on the outside by saying, okay, I see the gray hair, I see the wrinkles, that person is not young. But it's because of the loss of all these cells and the creation of senescent cells that we have aging, right? Well, that occurs because of the Hayflick limit. So Leonard Hayflick first sort of discovered the fact that eukaryotic cells only divide, 40 to 60 times before they stop dividing in 1961. He's still alive today, by the way. He's 97. And prior to that, it was thought, Alexis Carrel used to say that he was a Nobel laureate, so everybody kind of worshipped him. And he had this line of cells that were living forever. And he said, no, eukaryotic cells can live forever if you find the right mixture of things to feed them. Well, Hayflick kept trying to reproduce that, and he couldn't. And he characterized that it was 40 to 60 divisions, period, and then they stop dividing and become senescent or die. And so it turns out that Alexis Carrel was just adding more cells every month. So in a little mixture that he had on the side. So you never want to go with, it's a great lesson we always learn, don't go with the mantra just because the Nobel laureate says so. Try to duplicate this stuff yourself. So when you understand that, it turns out that it's the telomeres on the end of your DNA that get shorter with every division. And so understanding aging comes down to telomeric caps on the end of your DNA that get shorter and shorter until they reach a critical length, and then it stops dividing or kills itself. And so that's what gives rise to aging that we see. One of the great things that is happening today is that because we understand that, there are researchers out there that have attacked that idea to prevent telomeres from shortening or lengthen the telomeres and therefore reverse aging, reverse the signs of aging, reverse age-related disease, and live longer. We've been able to 10x multiple mammals in the lab, meaning if you extrapolate that back to a human, 1,000-year lifespan, right? So that's never been shown in a human. There are problems with that. 90% of cancers have a telomerase activation as part of their two-hit hypothesis that gave you cancer. So one of the hits is that your cells start to live forever. Your telomeres get extremely long, and suddenly you have a melanoma or a lymphoma or some type of cancer. There's usually some other hit to the genome that gets you into the cancer realm. But what this aging paradigm has created is sort of a narrow window between living better, living longer, and developing cancer or more cancers. A lot of people think that aging in itself, telomere shortening and senescence, is a protection against the development of cancers. But Ron DePino, a researcher who was the CEO of MD Anderson from 2011 to 2017, and was also a mentor of mine of sorts at Albert Einstein in the 90s, has kind of changed the game in a way here. 20 years apart. So way back in the 90s, he was the first one to characterize telomerase. And telomerase is the way that we extend. It's the mechanism in a complex called TERT, T-E-R-T, TERT. That's what governs the lengthening of telomeres. And usually in young cells, there's a lot of TERT lying around, and so you're able to sort of maintain the length of those telomeres. As we get older, the TERT kind of gets oxidized and caps put on it, and it gets epigenetically senesced, and it sits there, and it's no longer active, and that's when our cells stop dividing and become senescent. And so he first characterized it in a knockout mouse. So he showed extreme aging in a telomerase knockout mouse. And then he showed reversal of that by reactivating TERT, reactivating telomerase. So in working on cancer, he inadvertently or advertently also characterized aging. Well, 20 years later, he teamed up with folks from Scripps out in La Jolla, California, and Peter Schultz. And they went through many different small molecules and figured out what molecule may actually help that TERT come back to its normal level and avoid the overexpression of TERT that you see in cancers. And so really important to understand this, because the future of aging is that we may not age very much. We may extend the lifespan of humans to 100, 150, 200, or beyond without the extreme increase in certain types of cancers. And that's kind of the holy grail, right? Is to not need a facelift. I mean, all the things that we're talking about, Lee, are due to aging. You're trying to reverse aging, right? Well, what if you're not aging in the traditional sense? You may not need a facelift ever, possibly, or until you're 60, 70, 80, 90, or beyond, right? Because you don't look like you're aging. I mean, if you talk to a 20-year-old, they're not going to agree to a facelift, right? Because they don't look like they need it. Well, if we're able to reverse aging, you're not going to look like you need it until much later. So you might not need anything except good nutrition and exercise, right? And I think that's kind of the goal. So if everything works out the way we think it should, you and I will be out of a job in terms of plastics.
So question, does this mean that we're going to be able to do anything we want to do? I mean, does this mean we're going to be able to eat whatever we want to eat? We've got GLP-1s. We can just throw caution to the wind because there's just something that we'll be able to take that's going to make a difference, that's going to reverse anything bad we're doing?
You can't do that now, right? You can't do that now, right? Because if you are the product of your routine. Life is about actions and consequences. If you get up every morning at 5 a.m. after sleeping 8 hours and you have a good workout, you hydrate yourself well, you eat a Mediterranean diet, you work a reasonable amount, get some good rest, minimize your alcohol, you're going to look like, after 5 years of doing that, you're going to look like a person that does that. You're going to be fit, low body fat, good skin, good eyes, everything's going to be fine. If you eat nothing but processed, terrible food, don't exercise at all, smoke heavily, drink heavily, and have a terrible sleep problem, you are going to look like a person that has all of those things, right? So I'm not entirely sure that simply preserving your telomeres is going to completely free us from the need to have a routine that keeps us healthy. I don't think it will.
Ben, for those who don't know, what is a telomere?
Telomere is the end cap on all of your chromosomes. They used to call it nonsense DNA. Remember that?
Yep.
It is repetitive, but it's actually what helps keep the structure together.
I like to think of it as the twist tie that holds the chromosome together. And as the twist tie comes undone, when it gets to the end and it comes completely undone, then all of a sudden the chromosome is exposed.
I'm with you, dude. I always call it the protective end of the shoelace. That little cap that goes on the end of the shoelace.
That's a good way.
Yeah. So to answer your question, telomeres are the protective ends on the like the cap on the end of the chromosome, right, in humans. And so if you think about like a shoelace has that little protective end to it to help it stop from fraying and unraveling, that's what a telomere is. How it helps us and how it governs aging is that every time that you divide, a small piece of it is removed unless you have functioning telomerase, an enzyme inside the cell that maintains its length. After about 40 to 60 divisions, usually you're a much older being at that time, and your telomerase is no longer functioning and can't do that. So you wind up senescing, and that cell winds up dying.
Explain a little bit about autophagy and where that fits in terms of, okay, now we've got lengthened telomeres, our cells are lasting longer, we're lasting longer, but as you said, now you have an increased potential to create cancers and those types of things. Is there a way to get rid of the bad cells? And tell us how autophagy comes into play.
Yeah, look, we talk about this during fasting. Anna Maria Cuervo from Einstein characterized the phases of fasting and how our body is programmed to perform autophagy, auto-eating, autophagy, where, after a certain number of hours, you wind up, without eating, you wind up scanning all the cells in your body and thinking, okay, who are we going to eat first? I guess it must have been kind of like what happened in the Donner Party, like they're scoping people out to figure out who's going to make the best meal. Basically, cells that have things going wrong in them, senescent cells like we just talked about, cells with DNA damage, both of those are ripe for cancer. So pre-cancerous cells get eaten first. And that's a great way to kind of clean up your body. Yeah, so none of those things would change. All the stuff that you and I were talking about before, Lee, like what are the things that help you? Like peptides work really well in some ways to sort of lengthen telomeres. Epitelon is a well-known telomere lengthener. And all these other things that we talked about, like fasting for aging, right? A Mediterranean diet for decreased aging. Those things are important in and of themselves, but upstream of that is the fact that if we can turn on the telomerase inside your cells and allow them to stay long, we're going a great distance further in terms of longevity than any of these smaller tweaks that we make to the downstream damage that occurs in our body. If you can keep those cells around and stop them from senescing and dying, you're making not just a few years difference, but you're actually extending the 120-year cap that we put on human existence right now, possibly into the 150 to 200 year or beyond.
Now, just to throw in kind of our final segment on this, public policy. How does having a bunch of people
right?
living till 150, 200, how are we going to feed everyone? Where are they going to live? We're gonna have to be on the moon, right? At some point.
Listen, exactly. Listen, I understand. We don't know. We don't know how this is going to play out. First of all, I don't know if TAC, this TERT-activating compound, is that going to be available to everyone? Is everyone going to go down to the drugstore and get some TAC? I don't think so. I think that something that reverses aging and age-related diseases, we're going to have to talk about that, right? Because talk about term limits in Congress. I mean, do you really want the ideas of somebody who's been floating around for 200 years to be the ones that you're governing the kids that are just being born and growing up?
Well, think about it. If this was around when our country was started, George Washington might still be president.
Yeah, I mean, and he'd have like a proper set of teeth.
No, he would have normal teeth because he'd be taking the appropriate peptides that his teeth wouldn't have fallen out.
Right. Well, that wouldn't have happened till later, but you're right. Yeah, he would have been doing much better. But who knows? He could have been, maybe a meth head or something.
Yeah, never know. You never know.
We should probably erase that.
And we'd actually be able to ask him, did you in fact chop down the cherry tree?
Yeah, exactly.
We all want to know.
History will take on a very different slant also, because you're not going on a 20-year cycle of generations, right? Your generational lens is gonna sort of widen out, and suddenly you're gonna fisheye lens history. You're gonna be able to look at history in like a 70, 80, 90-year block that you actually were there for.
Yeah.
Right? Not just you're hearing from however it was written. So I think that it changes us on every level, not just, the selfies that you're going to be doing like this, This is gonna be sort of a complete shift in human existence.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be there for this, but hey.
Well, I mean, dude, that's not true, because this is coming down the pike now in the next 5 years. This is not something that's 60 years out. This is happening now. In fact, the trials for TAC either are starting now or have already started. And so, and the outcomes appear to be too good to be true. So we'll see. I don't know who it's going to be available to. I don't know how they're going to regulate it. And to your point, how the heck are we going to feed everybody if we can't feed them now?
In our two-part discussion of the modern facelift and aging, we've learned how modern facelifting has set the bar much higher in terms of our outcomes. We've also learned that with increased access to cosmetic procedures, both surgical and non-surgical, comes the potential for unrealistic expectations and body dysmorphic syndrome. Lastly, we discussed really a brief introduction to aging, and I think that will be the subject of an in-depth episode going forward. So thank you all for tuning in today, and if you loved what you heard today, please support us by following our podcast and telling a friend or colleague about us. We hope to see you next time on the next episode of Vital Discourse.